Mom secretly got married and dropped off my half-sister at my place for a date, then disappeared on her honeymoon, leaving me to care for her for days. I, 22 female, have a half-sister, Leah, 7 female, and she's my mom's daughter with my ex-stepdad. It sounds complicated, I know, but let me explain. So, my mother had me when she was 22 with her boyfriend at the time, and they were really young, so she hadn't been married to my biological father. She had wanted to keep the baby, but my biodad was not ready to take on the responsibilities of a father, so they went their separate ways. And she never saw him again, but continued to receive a child support check from him every month. Then, when I was 6 years old, she met my ex-stepdad, and they started dating. He didn't have a problem with me, thankfully, and even got along really well with me. So, within 3 years of dating, they got married, and we were a happy family for a really long time. Now that this is out of the way, I will be referring to my ex-stepdad as my dad for the post, because honestly, that's what I have always referred to him as since my biological father has never been in the picture. He's done more for me than my own mother, so he's as good as my father, even if we are not related by blood. I just didn't want there to be any confusion, so I cleared it up in the beginning. Now, coming to Leah. The circumstances of her birth were really strenuous, because that was around the time that my mother came clean to my dad about the affair that she had been having with a friend of theirs. A couple of weeks after telling us that she was pregnant once again, she told Dad about the affair because she didn't know whose baby it was, and she wanted to come clean before the birth of the child. My dad immediately filed for a divorce because this was absolutely unforgivable. Even though I was shattered about it at the time that these things were happening, I decided to choose my father's side and lived with him until I went away to college. After I found out about the affair and the reason that they were getting divorced, I did not have any contact with my mother for a good 4 years. Once my mother had given birth to Leah, a paternity test revealed that she was in fact my father's daughter, and then the custody battle got even more serious. My mother wanted full custody, and so did my father, so it was very difficult for them to come to the same conclusion. Allegations were made, mostly fake ones for my mother's end, and that's what turned me against her even more, because I knew my father. I knew what kind of a person he was, and I knew that he had done everything for this family, even though I was not his own flesh and blood. Yet, my mother had cheated on him with a person that he had called a friend. I was just a couple of months away from turning 16 at the time of the divorce, so I had clearly stated that I wanted to live with my dad, and that was settled. But it took several months for them to come to a conclusion about what was going to happen with Leah, and the custody battle continued well after the divorce was finalized. During that time, Leah was living with my mother because she was really just a baby and she needed my mom. Eventually, they were able to come to an agreement and decided on shared custody of Leah after she turned 1 year old, and that was implemented after that. So, I was able to bond with Leah 1 year after she was born, but I only started speaking to my mother again a couple of years back. We re-established contact about 4 years ago while I was still in college because she had had a major health scare, and I was afraid that I was going to lose her. I found out about it from my grandparents, and they begged me to speak to her just one time. So, I did. And then we started speaking to each other again. Of course, I discussed it with my father first, and he told me that he was fine with it because I was an adult and I could make my own decisions. He was also not the kind of guy who would use a child against their mother to punish them. Anyway, 4 years later now, I wouldn't say that we are the way that we used to be, but I am at least on speaking terms with my mother, and I occasionally do meet her too. I graduated last year and got a job soon after, so I've been living in an apartment that I share with my roommate and friend from college since then. Last week, my mom dropped Leah off at my place and said that she was going to go out on a date after a really long time. Unfortunately, her sitter had bailed at the very last minute because the woman was out sick. My grandparents were not in town, and my dad was away on a business trip as well, so he couldn't take care of her either. She told me not to mention any of this to him because she didn't want him to know that she was going out on a date, and the story checked out. So I did not find anything suspicious. She told me that she expected me to take care of Leah for a couple of hours, and that she would be back by night to pick her up. I agreed to it because I thought it would be a matter of just a couple of hours, so I was fine with it. Leah and I watched some TV for a while, and then I made her dinner, after which she fell asleep. It was around 9 at the time, and I waited for about 2 more hours before finally calling my mother up to ask where she was, because it was getting really late, and I had work the next day. But when I called her, it went straight to voicemail. I started panicking, so I called her a couple more times. She finally picked up on the fifth phone call and told me that I needed to stop spamming her. When I asked her where she was, she told me that she was going off on her honeymoon because apparently she had secretly gotten married to her boyfriend a couple of weeks back, and now she wanted to enjoy herself for a bit. I was speechless because that was not the reply that I had been expecting. I just thought that she had been caught up in traffic or something. When I recovered my senses, I instantly told her that she couldn't do this because I couldn't take care of Leah all on my own, and from what I knew, Dad wouldn't be back from his business trip for another 5 days. There was also the fact that I didn't even know if my roommate would be fine with this, since I had only told her that Leah was with us for just a couple of hours. While she had been fine with that, taking care of a child for several days was a different ballgame altogether. Both of us had work in the mornings, and I was freaking out, but my mother didn't seem to care and just said that this was my problem to deal with now, since Leah was my half-sister as well. So I needed to figure out a way to deal with this. Then, she hung up before I could say anything else, and after I tried to call a couple more times, I realized that she had probably muted me because it just kept ringing. I started losing my mind at that point, but I had to keep it quiet because both Leah and my roommate were asleep, and I had no idea what to do. Leah was on summer break, so it wasn't even like I could drop her off at school or something. On top of that, I didn't even have the phone numbers or the resources to arrange for a babysitter, and I just had no idea what to do. So, I called my dad up and told him everything. According to Leah's custody arrangement, my dad had her for half of the month, and my mother for the other half, so this was my mom's turn to take care of her. But she had bailed and had put me in a really difficult position. Not just me, but also my father, because this business trip was really important for him and couldn't come back for a while until he had dealt with everything. He calmed me down and told me that he would handle this, reassured me that I would not have to worry about it, and called me back a couple of minutes later to tell me that he had sorted everything out. He had spoken to a friend of his and had arranged for a babysitter who would watch Leah for the next couple of days while we were out at work. When he told me that, I could finally breathe a sigh of relief, because now all I had to do was tell my roommate about the situation, and she was a really good friend of mine, so I was sure that she would understand. The next morning, before I left for work, the sitter showed up, and I was incredibly relieved because she seemed like a professional, and I knew that my sister would be in safe hands. I also spoke to my roommate the next morning, and just as I had expected, she could understand what was going on and was fine with this arrangement. I thought everything had been sorted out, but later during the day, while I was at work, I received a phone call from my mother, and just like she had not answered my calls the previous night, I decided to ignore her as well, because I was incredibly pissed off at what she had pulled. But she just kept calling me again and again, so I finally answered, and she started freaking out at me instantly. She kept yelling at me, and I was able to understand that apparently my dad had called her and told her that what she had done was absolutely unacceptable, and now he would be filing for full custody once again. This time, he was going to make sure that he left no stone unturned to ensure that Leah stayed with him full time. He had apparently told her that she would be lucky if she was even able to get visitation rights, and she was yelling at me for all of this because she had given me very specific instructions not to bother my father with any of this because he was away on an important work trip and he did not want to be disturbed. She knew that, and yet, in spite of that, I had done exactly what she had asked me not to, and now she was going to get screwed over because of what I had done. She was pretty much hysterical and told me that not only had I ruined her honeymoon by pulling off this and getting her in trouble, but I had also ruined any chances of us being able to fix our relationship. I didn't like the way she was yelling at me, because as far as I was concerned, none of this was my fault. She had been extremely inconsiderate and had just pawned her daughter off on me because she was too lazy of a mother to think about her children and only cared about herself and her enjoyment. So, we got into a fight, and I told her that after the way she had started yelling at me and blaming me for the consequences of her own actions, I was sure that my dad was going to get custody. That seemed to get her even more riled up, and she cussed at me for a bit and then hung up. I thought that that would be the end of it, and even blocked her because I was really pissed. But in the evening, she called me up once again from her husband's phone, but it was not to yell at me, but to apologize and practically beg me to fix this situation. When I heard her voice on the other end, I was about to hang up, but she begged me to at least hear her out, and I decided to give it a chance against my will. She told me that she had just wanted some time to herself because taking care of a child along with working was really exhausting, and she didn't get a moment to herself, especially since Leah was now on summer break. She told me that she didn't expect me to understand it or even forgive her because she really should have spoken to me and made sure that I was okay with this arrangement, but she had been scared that I would say no, and then she would not have anybody to rely on. Her usual sitter was sick, and she couldn't trust anybody else with her daughter, which is why she had chosen me. Then she explained that the reason she hadn't told me anything about her secret boyfriend or about her marriage for so long was because she was afraid that I would stop speaking to her once again, just like I had back when she was getting divorced, and she did not want to lose me once more. She admitted she was wrong, but said she just wanted me to help her out one last time, because if there was anybody who could talk to my dad and fix this, it was me. But at the time, I was still very pissed off, so I said that she probably deserves to lose both me and Leah because of her behavior, and told her there was nothing that I could do to help her out. Then I hung up and blocked that number as well. Since then, I've been receiving messages from fake accounts on social media, with my mom telling me that what I'm doing is not right, and that the statement I made about her deserving to lose both her daughters was really incredibly hurtful. I thought about it, and I do feel kind of bad. However, given the circumstances, I also do think that she's making this way harder than it needs to be. I'm feeling a bit conflicted right now, so I'm here to ask for any help or advice. So, Aitia for telling my mother that she deserves to lose her daughters because of the way that she has been behaving. Update 1 Hi, thank you so much, you guys, for all the advice in the comments. So I realized that the more I think about the situation, the worse I'm going to feel about it, so I decided not to think about it at all. I had already blocked my mother, and she had no way of reaching out to me other than making several accounts on social media. I decided to block a couple of accounts that she had made, and then decided not to open any new messages from anyone that I didn't already know. That way, I can keep my mind off of things. I also spoke to my dad about what he was doing regarding the custody situation, and he told me that he had made up his mind about it, and there was no changing it. So I told him that I actually think it's the right thing to do because my mother has made it sufficiently clear several times that she couldn't care less about the well-being of her children and to her. The only thing that matters is whether she herself is happy or not. We can go take a hike for all we want. After speaking to my dad about this, I also got to find out a lot of other things that I did not know before. It's not just this particular one-off incident that has forced him to make this decision about filing for full custody. He had apparently been considering it for a really long time, because a couple of months back, he found out from Leah that she had been left with the sitter for most days, because her mother would just be out all the time. When confronted about it, my mother said that she was busy with, but now he thinks that it was probably her boyfriend that she was busy with and not work. There were other reasons as well, like how the school that she went to had informed him that they had noticed that in the past couple of months, Leah would regularly attend school in the first half of the month, but there would be several unexplained absences in the second half, and they wanted to make sure that everything was right at home. Leah had explained that she and her mother occasionally slept in because my mom gets too lazy to take her to school on some days, and it had been fine initially. But I don't think that skipping school for almost 5 or 6 days in 2 weeks is fine. Even after all of this, my father had been willing to look past what my mother was doing just because Leah seemed to be happy with this arrangement so far. But now, my dad also had to think about the future and about some sense of stability in Leah's life, because he did not want her growing up thinking that whatever my mother was doing was right. I'm completely on his side. She used to be a really proactive mother when I was little, but I guess age really does change you. Anyway, he's going through with what he had promised her and is going to file for full custody after he has his lawyers draw up the papers once he's back. Update 2, Hi. So, my dad finally returned from his business trip today and picked up Leah in the morning. She was very happy to see him, but she was kind of upset that she was going to have to leave because apparently she really enjoyed living with me and my roommate. Both of us were really happy that she had enjoyed spending time with us, and we have been considering having her over more often because this was really not as difficult as I had thought it would be. And even my roommate seems to like Leah a lot. She really brightens up the house. Anyway, now that my dad's back, he's going to file for full custody with his lawyer. He wanted to be there in person when he did that, because he wanted to go over the paperwork personally. To answer you guys who are asking why he didn't just get his lawyer to do it for him while he was away, I haven't heard from my mother yet. There has been absolute silence from her, and after I started ignoring all the messages that she was sending from all those fake profiles, I guess she realized that talking to me was pointless because I was not going to side with her. Also, a lot of you guys were speculating if the person that she is married to currently and has been with for the past couple of months is the same person that she had cheated on my dad. And no, to answer that, it's not him. The guy that she had had an affair with earlier had left the country a year after my parents' divorce, so this has got to be a different person. Anyway, it's really none of my business who she's married to, and my dad wouldn't care about it either. But now he is worried, because if he doesn't succeed in getting full custody of Leah, this person might become a part of her life as well. So, it's imperative for him to know what kind of a person she's been involved with. But that's something that he's not going to worry about right now, since the legal proceedings have not even started yet. Personally, I really think that he stands a strong chance to get full custody. So yeah, fingers crossed. Update 3. Hello, a couple of days have passed since my last update, and my mother probably came back yesterday because she showed up at my place. From the looks of it, she had taken a cab right from the airport as soon as she had landed. I could see through the peephole that she also had another man standing beside her when she rang the doorbell, and I could barely recognize him. Of course, I told her to go away almost immediately because, first of all, it was the weekend, and I really wanted to relax after working hard the entire week. I did not want to waste my time arguing with her. Secondly, there was literally nothing that she could say or do to make me change my mind about speaking to my father and getting him to back down from filing for full custody. You screw up, you face the consequences. That's just how it goes. Most importantly, my roommate was at home, and she had been out drinking the previous night, so she was nursing a terrible migraine and a hangover. I did not want to bother her with any loud interactions with my mother, so I told my mom to go away. But obviously she did not. She ordered me to open up and took a tone with me that can only be described as commanding. I was really taken aback because the last time that I had spoken to her, she was begging me to take her side. But now, she had pulled a full 180. I told her that I would call the cops if she argued with me any further, and that would not be nice for her. But once again, she used the same tone with me and said that she was not here to play around, and if I did not open the door, then she would have her husband break it down, and that wouldn't be nice. At that point, I started finding things really weird, so I took out my phone to call the police, but it was right then that her husband probably started slamming his body against the door. So I had to back up, and I was really shocked that this was even happening. I got really nervous, and my hands started shaking. Eventually, the door gave out because I live in a really old building, and the doors have never really been the strongest part of the structure. Besides, her husband seemed to be quite a heavy man, so it was not so big of a surprise that he was able to break open the door. By the time he entered, the wood had splintered, and the door was hanging off one of the hinges. Trust me when I say this, I had never been more scared in my entire life than I was in that moment. In the meantime, my roommate had heard the door being hit repeatedly, had rushed out of her room, and was about to tell me to call the cops when the door gave out, and my mother and her husband entered the room. I still had my phone in my hand, and my roommate was about to get hers, but my mother was quicker than both of us, and we were in shock and really scared. So she took advantage of that, grabbed my phone from my hand, and stopped my roommate from going back inside her room to get her phone by standing in the doorway. She instructed my roommate to leave the apartment for a while because she wanted to speak to me in person, but my roommate stood her ground and said that she was not going anywhere, and whatever it is that my mother had to say, she could say to both of us. I could tell that she was just as scared as I was, but I'm really grateful to her that she stood by me and didn't leave me alone with the two of them, because I'm pretty sure that they're both psychopaths, and there's something seriously wrong with both of them. Anyway, once we were both seated, she turned to me and said that she had tried things the nice way, but it had clearly not worked, and now she had no other option but to intimidate me into taking her side. She said that she wanted me to call up my dad right in front of her and tell him that if he did not take back his petition for full custody, then I would never speak to him again and really sell it to him until he agreed to back off. It was an incredibly stupid plan, but I guess my mother was just desperate, so she wasn't thinking straight. There were a million loopholes, like even if I did call him up and convince him, I could just go back on my word later and explain the situation to him, and she would be back to square one. But at that moment, my only priority was to get my phone back, so I played along and said yes. So she handed me my phone with my dad's number dialed. As soon as my dad picked it up, I immediately told him to call the cops and send them to my place because my mother was literally holding me hostage. My mother quickly snatched the phone back from me, and then she went ballistic. She started shaking me by the shoulders and cursing at me. I honestly expected her to start frothing at the mouth. She was acting that feral and crazy. Thankfully, I guess her husband came to his senses and said that if I had instructed my dad to call the cops, then they would show up at any moment, and it would be better for them to leave. She didn't bother to listen to him, so he literally abandoned her and made a run for it, so much for their marriage vows. But even after he had left, she continued to fight with me and eventually just started crying when she heard my dad show up with the cops at the door. After that, we had them arrested, and I'm certain that she just ensured that she wouldn't be getting custody of Leah anymore. Once she was taken away by the cops, my dad made us pack all the important things in the apartment and took me and my roommate to his own house, and that's where we are right now. Now my mother and her husband are probably going to get charged for what they did, and I'm really happy about it. My roommate and I are also going to start looking for a new apartment, but until then, my dad has opened up his home to us, and we are really grateful for it. I also get to spend a lot of time with Leah, so that's nice. Now, I'm just hoping that my mother and her husband get punished for what they did, because it was a really traumatic experience for both me and my roommate. I felt especially worse for her, because this was my family drama that she got involved in, but I'm also thankful for her, because I don't know what might have happened had she not been there in the apartment with me that day. Update 4. Hi. So this update is coming almost 2 months after my last. I've been busy for the past 2 months, so I do apologize for the delay. Anyway, a couple of weeks back, the judge signed off on my dad getting full custody, and my mom gets supervised visiting rights. She should count herself lucky she got even that, because she's currently looking at least 3 months in jail and a huge fine because of what she put me and my roommate through. Her husband was lucky enough to get off with community service since he had had the good sense to make a run for it in just a nick of time. Anyway, I'm just happy today. I won't have to interact with my mother anytime soon, and I'm very relieved that this is all over now. I also moved out of my dad's house a couple of weeks after I posted my last update since my roommate and I were able to find a new apartment in a much nicer neighborhood. A lot of you had questions about why none of our neighbors in the apartment building had made any phone calls to the police if they had heard the door being broken down, or even any loud noises at all. Nobody even bothered to check out what was going on, and, well, it's just that we lived in a pretty dangerous and terrible neighborhood. The rent was crazy affordable, and we were just being cheap, which is why we had made that decision. But after that incident, we realized that we would much rather spend a little more money and live in a nicer neighborhood with people who would at least have our backs and call the police in case something went wrong. In our previous neighborhood, things like this were not a rare occurrence, and there was barely any security. So people mostly just thought that it was better to mind their own business because they didn't want to get caught up in anything dangerous. Which is why I can understand why they did not bother to check up on us or call the police. Anyway, my roommate and I live in a much better place now, and I have made sure that I have cut ties with anybody who still had contact with my mother after that particular incident, including my grandparents. I want nothing to do with anybody who thinks that what she did was right. But as of now, we are all happy, healthy, and safe. And that's what matters.